Hello, Seth Grover here. Thanks for joining me. After releasing our last video, Network Traffic Analysis with Malcolm, which served as an introduction both to Malcolm's features and how they can be used to analyze PCAP data, I thought it would be a good idea to get a little more hands-on and go through using Malcolm on some practical examples. To do this, I'll be using a PCAP developed for the Spring 2020 SANS ICS Virtual Conference Capture the Flag exercise, courtesy of SANS and Dragos. I contacted the SANS Institute Intellectual Property Director and received permission to use these artifacts, and I'm grateful for that work, the work that went into this excellent scenario. Today I won't be solving the challenges from that CTF themselves, although I highly recommend finding and solving past capture the flag competitions to beef up your Malcolm skills and network security chops in general. Instead, I've put together a handful of exercises that will get us into Malcolm and help get those new to the project familiar with where you might go to learn about your network traffic, what kinds of things you might look for, and some tips you can use to make use of the various tools and data sources Malcolm provides. So either sit back and watch as I go through these exercises, or grab and upload your own PCAPs and follow along with your local Malcolm instance. Most of these exercises aren't really specific to this data, so the techniques ought to apply to whatever network traffic data you're interested in. So we're going to go ahead and do our host and network segment mapping now, and I'm going to do that by navigating on the Malcolm web interface to my Malcolm instance is running on localhost, and the name map UI is the interface that I'm interested in. And since I was previously authenticated before I started recording this, I didn't have to put in my username and password. Now, if I was going to start doing this from scratch, depending on how big my network is, I'd either just start typing IP addresses in, one at a time, something like this. Then click save, or maybe another segment, home network. And we're going to call 1.2.16.0.0/12 or something like that. This is home network, etc. In this case, for our example, I've already created a network mapping for the PCAP that I'll be using for our for this demonstration. So if you've done that before, you can actually save that and back that up and then restore it later, which is what I'll be doing now. So I'm going to click import. And I'm going to replace the name mappings with this netmap.json file that I previously created that already corresponds to this PCAP. I'm going to do that, and you'll see that it populates my list here with segments and hosts that make up my network map. As you're doing these, you can also you can search the list. For example, if you want to come back later and look up, what you created as your you want your list of, historians or something like that. I can start typing historian here, and it'll filter that list, or just any text that's available here. We can start typing that, and then it will filter that list. But once we've defined our host and network name mappings, we're going to go down to the bottom of this list. We're going to click Save, and click Yes to save our name mappings. And then what we're going to do is, before that will take effect into our name ingestion, into our PCAP ingestion, we will need to click Restart Logstash. And it will tell us, make sure that we actually want to do that, want to apply the save name mappings and restart Logstash. And if we do that, it says Logstash ingestion is restarting in the background. Log ingestion will be resumed in a few minutes. And I can click OK. And at this point, after I wait a couple of minutes and wait for Logstash to come back up, we will be able to continue with our upload and make sure that those IP addresses are mapped to the names that we've specified here. We're going to upload our PCAP file now by navigating to the localhost/upload, and that's going to present us with the Malcolm capture file and log archive upload interface that we just discussed. I have got my PCAP file here, and so as it uploads this PCAP file, I talked about the tags it's going to apply. So if I wanted to tag this with, for example, I'm doing this for this training video, so I could create a tag called training, and it would add that. Or if this was a particular site, site ABC, customer 123, incident, omega, whatever. Oops, you got the idea. Anyway, I could apply whatever tags I want here, and those tags would be searchable after I do the upload. Additionally, Malcolm will take and create tags from the name in the PCAP file itself. So in this case, where the PCAP's file name is cyberville.pcap, the tag Cyberville will automatically be applied. So I'm not going to create any additional tags here. I don't really need any besides this default one that I've got from the file name. But I could add as many other PCAP files as I wanted to here if I had multiple PCAP files. And then once I'm done, I can either start them individually or just click Start Upload. For our first exercise, we are going to look at this PCAP data, this Cyberville microgrid PCAP data in Kibana. And here are some of the questions we're going to try to answer about this traffic. We're going to try to determine what common or IT protocols were observed, what protocols might exist in a corporate network. What about ICS, OT protocols? What types of files were transmitted and how were those files transmitted? Were there any HTTP user agents that observed that might be of concern? We're going to examine a specific protocol here. In this case, I've picked Ethernet IP, but we're going to go look and see some specifics about the operations according to that protocol. Were there any stop operations? Were there any reset operations? And in what network segment were these operations observed? If this doesn't apply to the traffic that you're looking at right now, pick a different protocol and you can follow along and look at the actions that apply to that protocol. We're going to look and see if there were any credentials that were passed in clear text. If so, we're going to try to identify the usernames and passwords that were used during that authentication. We're also just going to look around Kibana and see if we can find any other potential red flags that might warrant our investigation in Kibana. And then finally, we're going to get into an example of creating a custom visualization. In this case, we'll create a visualization to highlight cross-segment traffic. So let's jump in and start looking at this data in Kibana. Okay, we are in Kibana. My data is loaded up. I waited a few minutes for the log processing and everything to happen in the background, and I've got to the point now where logs aren't trickling in anymore, so I think we're set. I've already set my search time frame to be the time frame that I'm looking at. For this data, it's somewhere around the 28th of April 2020. So yeah, this is what I'm looking at. The first question we were going to, oops, I don't know what I'm doing here, discarding changes or whatever. The first question we were going to answer was, what common IT protocols were observed, and then what about ICS or OT protocols? Well, just from this overview dashboard, you can see we started off with kind of a softball here. You can kind of start to already answer this question, right? We've got on the overview dashboard, we have got a list of application protocols right here. If I want to actually see more in that list, I can click Inspect, and that will show me kind of the entire list, still paginated, but with a little bit bigger pages. And we can order it by counts for seeing the most common ones at the top or the least common ones at the top. This actually shows us the version, the application protocol version as well, as long as that is appropriate. Doesn't always apply because some protocols aren't versioned. We can also get a CSV here of this list if we wanted to export that and then import it into Excel or LibreOffice or whatever your spreadsheet of choice is. So this kind of answers that question for us as far as what protocols are observed in our network. If we wanted to get a little bit more specific about the IT protocols versus the OT protocols, there are a couple different ways we could do that. We could go into the ICS/IoT security overview dashboard, which is going to be very specific about our ICS protocols. And it will actually just list those out right here by count. So in this PCAP, we've got Modbus, we've got Ethernet IP, Common Industrial Protocol, and then S7 common COTP. So yeah, that's our ICS protocols. We've actually got another kind of inverse of that report here, which is non-ICS/IoT protocols observed. And the reason that exists in the ICS/IoT security overview is the idea being that you may filter this report by a subnet that is your OT subnet, and then you could see what non-OT protocols are in your OT subnet. But in this case, it provides us a good list of all the protocols here that aren't necessarily ICS specific. So I think we've pretty well got that wrapped up. A couple of easy ways to see what protocols are in your network would be those dashboards. And these overview dashboards, whether it's just the general overview here, the security overview, and then the ICS IoT security overview, are a pretty good place to answer a lot of questions about your general network traffic. The next question we had was, what types of files were transmitted and how? So that one also not too difficult with Malcolm. We've got a dashboard just for that purpose, and that is the files dashboard. So I'm clicking over here in my dashboard navigation pane, and we're listed with our files dashboard. We see that over the course of this PCAP, there were 756 file transfers that occurred. And if we want to know what types of files those were, we can look no further than the files MIME type bar chart. That's going to give us kind of a list of our top file transfers by type. Again, I'll expand that out here. I could get a CSV if I wanted to, or I can look at or I can just look at the dashboard and kind of tilt my head 45 degrees to the left and read all these. I should probably, I don't know, make these more readable somehow. But anyway, here they are. We could export that if we wanted to as well. Most common is text, either HTML or plain. A little bit high on the number of executable files that are being transferred. And I think that normally that would be maybe a little bit concerning to me and be something I would want to go investigate. And then we can look down and see what other stuff is here. If there's anything that jumps out to us in the kind of network that we're looking at. As far as how those files were transferred, we can stay right here on this files dashboard and look at the file source table. That file source table will show us the transfer mechanisms for these files: HTTP, SMB, and then a couple over RDP. My guess is these RDP ones are probably not really file transfers the way you're thinking of file transfers, but are likely just a transfer of a TLS certificate. If we were wanting a little bit more information on the HTTP and the SMB file transfers and which were which, well, first we could, at least apply a filter. If we limit the filter that we're looking at right now to SMB, that cuts our list down up here in the files MIME type dashboard visualization a little bit more. You can see that 43 of our executable files, and then some text INI. Here, let me do this again. Inspect. All right, so here's the files that were transferred over SMB, just kind of a subset of that whole list. And if we were more interested in the HTTP, let's just go through this whole list here. Right, looks like most of those were HTTP, obviously. And then we'll see if my guess was correct on those RDP file transfers. Those are there they are. Application X509 user cert. So these are TLS certificates. So that's, I think, a pretty good idea of what files were transferred. One kind of thing to note here, some charts will only show the top N items in a list, right? So if we look at this chart here, we're looking at, I don't know, 20, however many here. If we're not sure how big this list is, and we're thinking, yeah, well, in this bar chart, am I only getting the top 10 or 5 or 20? One way you can find out if there are more is you can click Edit and actually click on this little gear icon and edit that visualization. We're going to get into the visualization editing in a minute here, but it takes us over to the visualization editor for this chart. and we can just look right at, it's under data and buckets. You can see that this is bucketed by Zeek files MIME type, and this is our top 20, right? So like, I don't know, bar charts aren't great when you have 200 items in there often, and that's probably why it's set to 20. But we could set it to some bigger number, and if that chart gets a lot bigger, we might be like, hey, maybe I don't want this in a bar chart. Maybe I want it in like a table where it's easier for me to see like hundreds of elements. In this case, I think the number is actually 20, and so we didn't really change anything there. So we didn't need to check that. But in case we wanted to get a fuller list, you might need to come in sometimes and edit that visualization, or just hop over to like the Discover view and see the top ones there. So I'm not going to save the changes to this. I'm not going to save this dashboard. We're just going to discard our changes. And then, like I was getting to with the file sources, if we're interested in one of these particularly, like let's say I was interested more in this SMB file transfers, I might go down a little rabbit hole and click on SMB in the SMB dashboard, take me to the SMB dashboard, and see more about the SMB traffic that I have here, including like file paths and file names, right? So I was over there, I saw that there are some SMB files transferred, and I'm just going to jump over here to the SMB dashboard and like get a little bit better idea of what was actually transferred here. We got some, beacon.exe, a little bit on the nose, but hey, this was a capture the flag. We don't want to make it too difficult for people. And we got some various different things. Probably some printer stuff going on here. Shortcut.link, desktop.ini. Someone was backing up this whole folder, it looks like. So yeah, there you go. You can get a pretty good idea from the files view what files are being transferred, and then based on this files source visualization, we can just pivot over into other dashboards that we're interested in to get more details. The next question was, were any HTTP user agents observed that may be of concern? Well, gentle listener, you can probably guess that we're going to go over to the HTTP dashboard, because what better place than to find information about HTTP traffic than the HTTP dashboard? Right at the top, we've got a list of, how many logs we have and some interesting stuff about usernames and passwords. And we've got a breakdown of the methods. Not the methods, I'm sorry. It looks like these are the results, the status. But what we're looking for is what? We're looking for user agents. So let's scroll down and see what we can find here. Cool. We have got, HTTP user agent table. And these are ordered by count descending, and it's not a very big list. If we had 10 pages of these things, we might be clicking through these for a while. But where we're asked, are there any observed that may be of concern? If I did have a bigger list that wasn't just so easily kind of viewable by having it all on one page, I might actually reverse the sort order on that count, because oftentimes it's more useful to see what's the least frequent thing in my network versus the most frequent thing when I'm looking for unusual or abnormal behavior. So anything that's got like a really small count, you kind of got to ask yourself, why did this happen one time, right? Like, what was introduced? What action did I take or someone in my network take to cause something to happen only one time? And we've got a couple of things here. I don't know, WebDAV. Some older Mozilla compatible web browsers, Microsoft Windows Media Player, UPnP might be interesting, and then some more Windows Media Player, and then this is the one that really makes me kind of stand up and take notice, right? Most of the time when I'm looking at, or maybe this one as well, but most of the time when you're looking at web traffic, it's going to kind of fall into two categories. It's going to fall into user-driven browser kind of based traffic, right? Like I'm sitting here and I'm surfing the web, or then scripted or automated traffic. And so when I see something like in this case, it actually is, Nmap is nice enough to say, Nmap scripting engine, and I look at that and say, oh, I know what Nmap is. Nmap is doing network topology mapping were we scheduled to do a network assessment maybe this week, and we actually ran Nmap internally, or could this be an indication that someone is scanning our network, and actually like pulling down HTTP headers, right? Probing things. But then this Python URL lib 2.71, this doesn't necessarily tell me what was happening here. And we might want to follow that down if we are so inclined. But this is obviously something that's scripted. Now, if I'm well aware of what's going on in my network, I would ask myself, what automated processes do we have running in our network that we scripted with Python, that are happening to do file transfers, or to whatever, scrape web pages, do file transfers, submit jobs. But that's definitely not just someone sitting in my network and browsing the web. The reason that would be concerning to me, potentially, if I wasn't aware of scripted stuff in Python going on in my network, is that can be a common way for an intruder to execute their code, right? Python's a ubiquitous programming language, and it has a whole great set of libraries for doing all sorts of stuff, and that stuff may be good, and that stuff may be bad, but where I've got just a small number of Python URL lib user agents on my network, that would definitely be something that I would probably follow up on. And I would do that really just right from here by clicking filter for value. And I'm going to filter my value down to just that Python URL lib. And then look at this dashboard, take a harder look at it. It looks like we have got some, you can see my destination and my host. It actually looks like an internal, well, no, they're both external addresses in this case. And we can see even what the URIs were, right? login.asp, bypass.png, and then sysinfo.json were the files that this Python URL lib. So I may, at some point in the future, if I was interested in this and this was my real network, I would definitely take these URIs, figure out what they were, maybe even pivot over into Arkime and look at them one by one. Because that Python URL lib stands out to me as someone's running some scripts on my network. Not to belabor the issue, let's move on. The next question was, how many Ethernet IP stop operations were observed? And again, I just picked that protocol at random, right? Pick whatever protocol you're interested in. But what we're really looking for is, the actions that were being performed by a particular protocol. In this case, since I am, and we'll look at two different ways to do this. In this case, since I am interested in the Ethernet IP specifically, I'm going to look down in my, that's a little interesting. I'm going to have to follow up on that. What's going on there? I'm running a beta here, you guys. Come on. Let's look at, I am actually running a pre-release version of Malcolm in this VM right now. So we're going to blame this little guy on that. Anyway, we're going to click on the Ethernet IP dashboard, and we are going to check that out here. Most dashboards for a specific protocol will break things like actions and results out pretty close to the top of the dashboard, because that's really like mainly what you're interested in, is what is this protocol doing. So I clicked on Ethernet IP. Ethernet IP is encapsulated in CIP, Common Industrial Protocol, which is why you see the two log types here. And then CIP identity is also associated with that. But if the question is how many stop operations and how many, stop operations and reset operations were observed, let's see what we can find here. Let's see. I'm seeing, did I zoom in on the dashboard here? I think maybe I did. Let me zoom out a little bit on our day. Like, just widen things just a little bit, make sure I actually do have everything. I'm seeing send RR data, send unit data, list identity, and register session. Okay, so that's the Ethernet IP commands. Maybe my CIP commands is actually what I'm really meaning here. Okay, yeah, probably. So when you have multiple protocols, right? Like there's different layers of encapsulation, and we have a certain kind of operations that are performed at the Ethernet IP level and other operations that are performed at the CIP level. So when I meant stop and reset for Ethernet IP, looks like I really meant CIP. So let's see if we can find out what we're looking for here. I'm going to click along through this CIP services and see what we have found. There's a start. Okay, cool. Stop and reset. There we go. I found my stop and my reset. So I could actually, if I wanted to see more about these in specific, I could like filter for this value, my stop value. I mean, I can just obviously just add these up here, but I could create a filter. I'm just going to edit that filter and say, look, if I have some service that is either stop or reset, and I clicked on that originally rather than coming and typing this in because I can't remember the name of this field. Ain't nobody got time for that. And we're going to click save on that, right? So now I'm looking at my stop and my reset just as one. So it looks like I've got, 4 stops and actually just 2 and 2, right? Because it's a request and response. 2 stop operations and then 2 stop responses with a success. 2 reset requests, 1 reset request, and then 1 reset response with a success. So I can see that those actually succeeded. The other cool thing that I have then, aside from like just that, is I know where the source of those requests and the responses came from. I've got a little bit more information here. If I knew more about CIP, I might know what these things meant. But the second part of that question was, in what network segments were these operations observed? Thank goodness I went through and identified my network segments earlier. I did that by saying localhost. Let's see, what was I doing? Oh yeah, localhost name map UI. And there's kind of a hard way and an easy way to do this. The hard way, I guess, is I could come here and I could look at 10.10.20 dot and 10.10.20 dot and flip back over and see, find my 10.10.20 dot, I guess. It's 10.10.20. Okay. So yeah, it looks like this is my combined cycle BOP network. Is my 10.10.20 dot. So that's pretty easy enough to tell that happened. If there was a bigger list here, I might actually take these filters and go build like a dashboard or something, that showed me that. The other way though, that's pretty easy to tell, is I've got my logs down here, and because I did that name mapping originally, I can actually expand these logs down, and they should be tagged with that. In fact, it is, yeah. That log is tagged with combined cycle BOP. And I can see my originating segment, Zeek.orig segment, and my responding segment, Zeek.resp segment, responding segment, is combined cycle BOP. So I didn't actually have to go look it up in my name map UI. I can just go down and look at these logs themselves and see that that's what's here. So that's the beauty of tagging, applying those name maps before I start, is it really gives me the ability to have this information here that I wouldn't have otherwise. I would not know without going and looking it up, because it wouldn't be actually sitting here in the event if we hadn't done that mapping to begin with. So we're cooking with gas. Were any credentials used in clear text? If so, identify the username and password. Okay, I don't think the Ethernet IP dashboard is where we want to be on this one. So let's go back to overview. Think about this one. We want to know if there were any clear text credentials used. So we are going to do, there are 2 different ways to do this one. Actually, there's lots of ways to do all these, right? And lots of ways to skin a cat. But I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this one here to determine if there were any credentials used in clear text. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the security overview, because that just seems to me like a security related issue, clear text passwords. So lo and behold, there's actually a visualization just for that. Clear text transmission of passwords. And in this case, it looks like they're all under the HTTP protocol, and the username is log plus in, and there's 15 of them. Now, if I wanted to know what this dashboard was doing to come up with this list, or what this visualization was doing, there's a pretty easy way for me to do that. And let me show you that, because this is a great way to get a better idea of like the fields and stuff under the hood. And so what I would do if I wanted to know how did it get that information, I would click Edit here, and I would click the little gear, and I would click Edit Visualization, and I can see right away what this is doing. Basically, it's saying if I have any field that has got password in it, if I have any field where the name of the field is password and there's any value, right? That's what this colon is saying. The colon is saying on the left of the column is what's my field. On the right of the colon is what's my value. So this is saying any field that ends in password, basically, and then what's my value. And there may be other ways to do that, right? I try to actually normalize all of the passwords to zeek.password, and it would hopefully give us the same answer, because that means I've done my job if it does. Yeah, it does. So yeah, I could get that here, and I could tweak this dashboard if I wanted to, this visualization. So we can tell at least what the username is here. Let's see the other way of doing that, and that would be with the Discover view. I know in this case I've got log in here and my count, but let's abandon this for a second. We're going to jump over to Discover. We're going to get a little bit more down in the details of these. So here's my Discover view. I'm looking at all 117,325 of my logs, and I want to know about clear text passwords, right? So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to start out by doing the same kind of a search that I was doing before. Zeek.password is anything. It gives me 15 hits. If I wanted to are there any other things that had password in them? I think I could do this. In this case, I don't think it gives me anything more than I already have. I think you do have to have this backslash to escape the star in the field names. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't remember why I did that. We're going to say we know what we were doing and that it was important. I'd have to go look at the documentation, though. But for now, as long as the normalization is happening the way we think it should, zeek.password will give us what we want. Now, it doesn't really become apparent here what the usernames and passwords are, because it's just kind of everything, right? So let's get a list of stuff that is more useful to us here. So maybe we'll look for we could look at the Zeek log type. We could also look at the service, which is the application protocol. So I can scroll down this whole list of fields. There's a lot of them. In this case, I know I'm looking for the service. So we're going to click, I start typing service here. We're going to click this plus, and I can see Zeek.service is now in my list. So that's cool. That's good. We want to know usernames. So let's see if we have any fields dealing with usernames. Probably, this is probably our Arkime version of user. And this is probably our Zeek user, and they probably are the same because we're only really looking at Zeek data right now in Kibana. So we'll just pick this one, Zeek.user. Okay, so we've got a filter, Zeek.password exists, and we're looking at service and user. Let's actually see what the password was. Now this is actually a feature you can disable in your local.zeek file. There's actually a variable in there that you can set to not extract the passwords if you'd rather not for security reasons, and I would refer you to the documentation to look at that. In this case, I just want everybody's dirty deeds to be exposed to the world, so we're showing the Zeek.password here, and it looks like we had quite a bit of kind of attempts here via HTTP login and Zeek.password. If I wanted to do a little more research on this stuff, I could find out some more things like what was the action and the result, right? I think it's pretty obvious in HTTP what those were, but since those are normalized, I often find it useful to add action and result to my list of fields that I'm looking at. And then the last thing that I might be interested in would be that Zeek UID, that unique identifier, because then I can use this connection UID to pivot around to the rest of my dashboards and over to Kibana or over to Arkime or whatever. So really, we've got a pretty good list of what's going on here. We've got all HTTP traffic between 145 and 152 on April 28th. So over the course of, less than 10 minutes, we had a bunch of attempts with login as the username and quite a few different passwords tried here and successes for the most part. So maybe this, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe this login will accept any password or who knows what, but this post does appear to have, this post action does appear to have bunch of passwords in it and successes on pretty much all of those. And I'm not sure what the deal is with these ones where the result isn't known. I'd have to do some research on that. So pretty useful information. The other thing I may want to do is look at my source IP or orig_h and response_h. Those are my hosts, right? So I can see, I don't know, let's get rid of the UID for now to make so I can see where these came from and where they were going to, right? This is the server of concern. And again, this is an external IP address, so I'm not exactly sure how they captured this data to have these two external IP addresses in our PCAP. But you can see at least where the source and the destination was. It gives you a pretty good idea of what you might need to go look at. Finally, the next question was, what are some other potential red flags that may warrant investigation? So this one's pretty open-ended. We've already hit, oops, that's not what I wanted. We've already hit kind of the basics, but let's just kind of review where I might go to look for things that are of concern for security-related stuff. And I would probably start in the security overview because most everything is going to at least have some kind of tie in there. Notices, right? Notices are like, hey, here's a red flag, and we've got a number of notices that show up here. We've got port scans. We've got some, now these ones that are MITRE attack categorized, this doesn't necessarily mean that these are actually an attack, right? But what it means is there was traffic that is following patterns that have been defined or laid out in the MITRE attack framework. And then these are the techniques that were used. So it's generally pretty good about picking up things that are suspicious or may look suspicious, right? But this doesn't necessarily mean someone was attacking me. It just means, hey, a technique was used that is often a technique used in pivoting using one of these techniques. And we've got some eternal safety vulnerabilities that were exploited here, it looks like, which is a family of SMBv1 exploits, I think. So a lot of stuff here in notices that I probably should go follow up on because these are all big red flags. And I would get more information about these notices by going to the notices dashboard, by clicking that over here. And then I would trace these down one by one and see, what are my hosts that are involved? What are the details of these? It'll give you a pretty good idea of what actually happened here, right? A file write to an admin file share, somebody executed a file off of a file share, that sort of thing. So security overview notices, number one, shows you some good red flags. Number two, this signatures report here. If I wanted to get more information on these signatures, I'll do the same thing as I did with the notices. I'll jump over to the signatures dashboard, and I will see that some files that were transferred in my network triggered some signatures, right? That actually, maybe I have a virus, or they triggered some known signature in Yara rules, and those things are things that I would want to investigate. Kappa is one note on this one. Kappa is a capabilities analyzer. And basically what it does is it scans executable files and tells you what they can do. Like this executable file, we can tell that it tries to detect virtualization, or it opens a network connection, or it runs a for loop or something. It can be a little verbose. I've actually got the verbosity turned down by default to where it doesn't include like everything that it can do. But certain things that executable files will do to avoid detection may be listed there in kappa, but sometimes they can be false positives. And so just kind of take that, for what it's worth. Like, it's a very cool tool. Don't get me wrong. I love kappa. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everything that's represented by this bar is nefarious. ClamAV, is an antivirus engine, so obviously those are things I probably would want to look at and see like what antivirus signatures are triggering on files that are transferred in my network, and then track that down. Like, where did these files come from? Where did they go? Where did they come from? ClamAV. So yeah, like, track these down. It's not really giving me a lot of information about what the file is here that triggered this, but luckily I've got this file unique identifier, and I'm just going to create a filter for that, pin that filter, and then jump over to the files dashboard. And lo and behold, I can see all sorts more stuff about that file. I can see that it was an executable file. It's 240 kilobytes, más o menos, and it was transferred via HTTP between these two hosts. And that gives me a lot better idea of what's going on there. I can probably, since it's HTTP, I've got this FUID still pinned, this unique identifier. So we've now gone right from the signatures dashboard to the files dashboard to the HTTP dashboard. And I'm glad that came up with 1, because boy, I'd have egg on my face if it was 0. And let's see what we know about it. Anything else? I guess we've got the user agent. Okay, cool. Here's the URI for it. It was downloaded from 10.10.10.11, post-exploitation. Again, that's a little obvious. But hey, this is fake data. But I know the executable is winpeas.exe. So just basically in a matter of a few clicks from that security overview dashboard to looking at a signature that we thought seemed bad on the signatures dashboard, filtering on that file, going to the files dashboard, seeing on the files dashboard that it was HTTP, and going to the HTTP dashboard, we know concrete actionable item here. We had a file that was downloaded that triggered a virus scanner, and we can tell that from our logs here. We already talked about clear text transmission of passwords. That can be an issue. This is one I would probably look at outdated insecure application protocols. If I'm running, SMB-v1, it's a lot more vulnerable than SMB-v2 or v3, right? So I would examine this list and see, like, is there any, upgrades or patches or anything I can do to get this list up to date? Telnet generally in 2021 is not something we want to be seeing a lot of. Regular unsecured FTP, probably not something we want to be seeing a lot of. Yeah, so there's all sorts of things. I guess the answer to this question would just be like, look at the security overview dashboard. Look at the, if you're on an OT network, look at the ICS/IoT security overview dashboard. This is kind of more a summary, I guess, of the ICS traffic. But what I would be looking for here would be, especially if there's anything here, is there any external traffic to or from the world that's talking to my ICS protocols? I would hope not. That's not something you want to have happening. Yeah. So anyway, there we go. I think we've probably beat that horse past the point of death. So we did a pretty good job on that one. Let's pat ourselves on the back and do the last one, which is create a custom table visualization to highlight cross-segment traffic. We didn't get into this in the other video, but it is really, really powerful to be able to create your own custom visualizations. So we're going to do that now with the power of Kibana's Visualize page. So I'm going to click Visualize here. and it will take me to like a list of all my visualizations. And boy howdy, there's a bunch of them. And we could just spend all day like looking through these and playing with them and stuff. But that's not what we're here to do. Let's stay focused. And we're going to create a new visualization by clicking Create Visualization. And there's a big list of them here, and I would recommend, go Google them and find out what's cool about them. The Kibana, all these cool Kibana visualizations, very cool. Including some third-party ones that I thought were neat enough to add in custom to Malcolm. We build a few of those in. This Sankey diagram and this network one are not part of default Kibana, but they are included in Malcolm. But again, let's focus. We're going to do a data table because that's what our boss said he wanted us to do. And we are interested in connections across all protocols that are cross-segment traffic. Now, the first thing you do when you create a visualization, and I'm doing a table here, but this applies to bar charts and pie charts, and it applies to kind of all of them. So if you're like, but Seth, I don't want to do a table, I want to do a pie chart. Don't worry, you can do a pie chart. Just follow the same steps, and you'll be doing a pie chart, except for click pie chart before where I clicked table. But the rest of the steps are all the same. First thing we need to do is choose a source. And so we're going to do that. And since I'm not interested in a specific protocol, right? Like if I was interested in HTTP, I would choose probably HTTP logs. Or if I was interested in FTP, I would probably choose FTP logs. But I'm interested in all connections, and I could just choose all logs, but that's going to be maybe a little bit more inefficient and include other types of logs that I might have in my database that I don't care about, or might include some different like duplicate kinds of logs. In other words, taking it from con.log and http.log. I don't really care to do that. So I'm just going to choose connections logs. This is basically my con.log, and it'll tell me what I need to know because that segment stuff is at the IP level and it's not protocol specific. So I click connections log, and you start out and you have kind of the most boring table of all, which is, I'm going to zoom things up a little here. I don't know if that's any better. That's just like a count, right? How many connections do I have in con.log? Why, it's 13,655. This is not a really useful table yet, but we're going to make it more useful by starting to slice and dice this number by making buckets. Buckets are our ways to categorize, to put in buckets. And so what we're interested in is cross-segment traffic. Well, let's see. I guess let's start with putting the fields we want in there, and then we'll narrow it down to cross-segment traffic. We could do it either way, but let's kind of think about the kinds of things we would want. I would want to know first kind of what kind of traffic is it? What protocols is it using? The first thing we're going to do then is we're going to add a bucket, and we're going to do split rows. If I do split table, it'll actually create two tables, one for each bucket. In this case, I don't want like 10 tables or 50 tables. I just want like one table that has them split up by rows. So I'm going to click split rows, and we need to now select an aggregation. These all mean different things, and I'm not going to explain all of them, but the one that you'll probably use the most often is terms. Terms means fields, essentially. Terms means data points. So we're going to click terms, and now we can select the field that we're interested in. We are interested in what kind of traffic this was, and the field that's going to be defined in our Zeek logs is zeek.service. I'm going to click zeek.service and order by count, descending, and if I just click run, you'll see I have 5 entries in here. Now, I actually have a lot more than 5 protocols in my network, and I probably care to see more than just the top 5. So in this kind of a table where I just want kind of everything, I'm going to make this number like a lot higher, maybe 100 or 200 or whatever, I don't care. And there we go. We've got a much bigger list now. That's cool. A couple other fields of note, though, that I want to make that are important kind of configurations is this group other values and show missing values. Group other values means, here I'm going to put this number back to 5. I've got a smaller list now. If I don't want a huge table, but I do want to know, hey, yeah, there are other things, group other values in separate bucket, and then you can define a label. I click update here. It creates this other. And everything else that didn't fit in these top 5 is getting added together and put in this other. Now when I go back to 200 or 100 or whatever I did, and I go over there, you'll see I don't have an other, right? Because they all fit. But I probably, unless I really don't care, I would probably turn that other values in separate bucket on. And then this other one's also important. Show missing values. This is saying anything for this bucket, this Zeek.service. What if I have some protocol that I didn't recognize? And so it didn't get assigned a Zeek.service name. Do I care about that? Do I want to see that in this table? I don't know. You tell me. I think maybe we do in this case. Maybe we are interested in traffic that didn't get assigned a service name. So I'm going to say show missing values, yes, and I'm going to give it a custom label, a label for missing values. Missing's fine. I think unknown in this case makes a little more sense. I click update. Oh boy, yeah, like most of my traffic actually was unknown. It didn't get assigned a specific service name. Either it was some protocol I don't know about, I didn't recognize, or for whatever reason Zeek couldn't determine what it was. And then right now it says Zeek.service descending. I'm going to give that a custom name. We're just going to call that like protocol or service. We'll call it protocol. Cool. So that's a little bit more of a useful table. We have protocol and we have counts for each of those protocols. We really care a little bit more about that, right? Than just about that. I mean, we care about more than just protocol. We also care about, well, we care about network segment because we're trying to find cross-segment traffic. And we care about maybe like what those IP addresses and stuff that we're doing the cross-segment traffic are. So we're going to follow that same pattern another 2 or 3 times to add more buckets. And I won't explain everything in such extreme detail as we go through this on these other ones, but I'll do the same thing. I'm going to click Add, Split Rows, and remember our aggregation, if we want to do it on another field, that's terms. And let's do, there we go, there's our segments, originating segment and responding segment. Now, if I didn't do my name mapping at the beginning, I would not know this and I would have to do this whole thing a very different way. But since I did it to begin with, my network segment mapping, and let's just click update as we go. Okay, cool, we got some segments here, that's good. See how much bigger our graph got? Because we added like a whole nother degree of freedom onto this graph, this table. I know I don't have more than like 5 segments, but in this case, I'll just do like 10 or whatever. And I might as well turn on other values in separate buckets. And the question here is, do we care about missing values? I don't know. That's a good question. Do we care about traffic in this table that happened from either subnets that like didn't get assigned or maybe like external? I don't know. I don't know. Let's turn it on for now and see what we get. See, we do have some traffic that is missing. Now, probably what this is traffic that is not internal at all, right? And so it didn't get an originating segment or a responding segment. It's probably public IPs. We might come back to this and turn that off. But for now, we're gonna give this label originating network segment. Click update. Okay, we're going to do this again one more time for the responding network segment. So I'm going to go to terms, and I'm going to go to segment again, responding segment. Same thing, like, I don't know, 10. And yes, show me if there's others. And yeah, show me if there's missing. And I'm going to say responding network segment. Segment. Cool. Now our table order has changed a little bit since we started. I'm going to just reorder that again. So we've got some stuff here. We've got protocol, originating network segment, responding network segment, and count. And now we want to know about cross-segment traffic, right? And there's a few different ways we could identify cross-segment traffic. Number one, we could check on our tag, right? Right now we have we have a lot of traffic here, but it's like in segment, intra segment, battery network to battery network, right? That's really not what I care about right now. I'm caring about traffic that's crossing segment boundaries. So let's add a filter to try to filter that down. Couple ways we could do that. We could do, let's see, we have a tag for it. Honestly, that's probably the easiest way. When we identify segments that are crossing traffic, Malcolm will just add this cross segment tag. So I'm doing a filter here on a field called tags where the value is cross segment. And if I run that, my table got just a lot smaller. Battery network, combined cycle BIP. So we've got some back and forth between these two networks. It looks like this combined cycle BOP is really the network that is crossing the most boundaries. Battery network does also talk to the solar panel network. And interesting here that I don't know what the protocol is on this. I don't know what's going on here. Maybe we could get a little bit more information on that. Let's add another row. And at least figure out if it's like TCP, or we could do desport. Let's see. Let's look at Zeek.proto maybe. And we'll do show other and missing. Yeah, okay, TCP, or yeah, it's all TCP traffic. I can reorder these rows too, by the way. The little, I don't know, bread sandwich thing here, whatever that is, the little grab bar, I can drag and drop. So we'll call this one transport, maybe. So now, at least for these unknown ones, at least I know it's TCP. We could get real involved here and maybe go one step deeper and show desport. There's a few different ways to get to it, but what am I doing? Oh yeah, responding port Zeek.resp_p. And in this case, I am going to show just the top 5 because I don't want to get like a huge list on ports. Normally, desport's not randomized, but we'll see. There shouldn't be any missing values because you should always have a port if you don't have a if you're doing TCP. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So that actually is all just one port. Let's give that a label. Okay. And I'm going to drag this guy up there with my service. And what do we got here? Very cool. So we have cross-segment traffic over TCP, unknown protocol, but the port is 139. I'd probably go Google that and see what that is. I won't do it right now because you can Google as well as I can. And we've got originating network segment and responding network segment. And like I say, there's lots of different ways to skin this cat. We could have compared those two values. We could have actually done like IP address CIDR filters on IP addresses and stuff. But in my mind, what we've done here is pretty easy. And it gives us a pretty good idea of like where's our cross-segment traffic and where do I need to go to track that down. If we wanted to add in IP addresses here, we totally could. It would make our table longer, right? But maybe that would be what we would want to see. We would want to like go track all these different hosts down. Or maybe I'm just going to do some filtering now and apply a filter where it's like filter for this value and filter for this value, and then go look over in my discover tag. Either way, you kind of get the idea, right? That's the pattern. And there's other options and things you can do to customize these, and these will depend on the chart type. In this case, I'm only seeing 10 rows per page. Maybe I want like a real long report and not just like page through them, more for like printing out and less for visual. And so I would set that max rows per page higher. I can do like totaling as far as like sum everything up, or there's all sorts of stuff I can do. Oh boy, that one got a little ugly. I'm gonna take that one off. Show me the percentage per count. Like lots of cool stuff you can do. And on pie charts and bar charts, these options will be different. So play with it a little bit, but the general pattern is the same. Define a data source, add buckets, and just customize until you get what you want. Last but not least, when you've made a useful report like this, let's save it and call this one cross-segment traffic by protocol. And then later on, when I come back from lunch, and I'm like, what was that? What did I do? Cross segment traffic by protocol. It's right there. And I didn't waste that hour or whatever it was. Probably not an hour, but it was a while that we spent building that. All right, now we're going to go through a similar set of exercises in Arkime. First, we are going to identify the top network device hardware manufacturers by OUI, or in other words, Organizationally Unique Identifier in SpyView. If you remember back to our other video, we talked a little bit about what OUI was. It's the way that we can use MAC addresses to identify the manufacturers of network interfaces. We are going to identify the top network services in SpyView where either side of the connection is a publicly routable IP address. So we're going to at least where one thing is not internal traffic, we're going to try to identify what services are talking to the outside world. We are going to use SpyGraph to view the top HTTP user agent strings chronologically and geographically and see if any of those are of concern to us. We're going to use the connections view to view Zeek connections grouping by originating and responding network segments. And then once we've got that, we're going to change the destination node to represent the application protocol instead. Then we're going to get into a few examples that use the Arkime's ability to do full PCAP, stuff with the full PCAP payload. So we're going to view the HTTP sessions for which full PCAP payload is available. We're going to narrow two connections which transmitted at least 8 kilobytes of data. And then we're going to export a PCAP file that contains those matching sessions. And then finally, we're going to find HTTP sessions where a Windows PowerShell script was uploaded or downloaded, and we're going to examine the packet payload of one of those sections, and we're going to actually look at that PowerShell script and see what it was doing. So let's get started with the Arkime stuff. So we are in Arkime. I have narrowed my time frame to the time of interest for the PCAP that we're studying. And we are going to do the first exercise here, which is identify the top network device hardware manufacturers, or OUIs, in SpyView. So we're going to flip over to SpyView here. And this one won't take too long. Now, of course, by default, we have just a few things open. And we can do this really one way, but I want to make a distinction between the types of data that we have here. If I'm looking at the General tab, and you'll also notice up here in the right-hand corner with the views, I don't have any views applied, right? So I'm going to click here in the Search for Fields text entry box and start typing OUI, and you'll see that list narrow. And we are going to look at source OUI and dest OUI. So here we go, and I mean, here's basically the answer, right? We have Dell, Amazon, Schneider Electric, VMware, etc., etc. But the distinction that I do want to make here is the two different data sources, the distinction between Zeek logs and Arkime sessions, and how we're viewing both of them at the same time. So I'm going to clear this out just to make this a little bit easier to see. I'm going to hide the other fields that we're not interested in at this moment. So we're just looking at those OUI fields. And so if you look, for example, here in the source OUI, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 16,000 under Dell. And I'm going to apply a filter here, a view actually. And I'm going to say, show me Zeek logs. And you'll notice my number is now 11,431. The complement of that, or the opposite of it, PCAP files, those are Arkime sessions. And then we have 4,826 here. And then, of course, we go back to none, and we're viewing all of them. So just be aware that when you're looking, by default, without any filters applied in Arkime under Malcolm, as long as you have both Zeek sessions, Zeek logs and Arkime sessions, you're viewing both of them together, right? So this number may actually represent several times or something, the same session in different logs, like once as an Arkime session and then several times as a Zeek log. So if you're just interested in Arkime sessions, you want to make sure you either apply this filter PCAP files here, so you're looking at Arkime sessions, or the Zeek items are split out individually under their own categories here in the spy view. So as I scroll down here, you'll see I've got this big list of Zeek stuff. These are all the different Zeek logs that we have. But just kind of the Zeek general category is here at the top underneath general. And if I search for OUI there under the field names, we have originating OUI and responding OUI. And you can see here that under general, where source OUI has 16,257 items, if we're just looking here, this is just looking at Zeek logs, and so we have 11,431 items. So just be aware, of when you're in Arkime, if what data source you're looking at. The other thing we can do here now that we have these, just to kind of illustrate what we can do in the spy view, for any of these particular fields, we can click on the field name, and we could export that to just a single flat text file. We could do the same thing with counts, export unique dest OUI with counts, and it's going to give us a text file that's comma delimited with the name and the count, and that could be imported into a spreadsheet or report of some kind. We could open this up in a spy graph, and I'm not going to do that right here because we're talking about spy view, but that would basically take that same dest OUI. Well, why not? We'll click on it. So basically it takes us to the spy view. We have the same start and end time. Sorry, the spy graph, not the spy view. But you'll see that dest OUI is already populated in this field, and then those values are broken out here in these date histograms chronologically, and then if I click the little view map button, also geographically, right? Most of these appear to be internal traffic, which is why you don't see anything on the map. This Syrian Systems one looks like it has GeoIP references from Russia, United States, and Canada. So that's what we can do with that. The other thing we can do, we can click pivot on dest OUI. This is going to take us to a sessions view, and what it's going to do is actually going to take all of those values and put them pre-populated into a filter, and says basically only show me things where this value is one of these that I've selected here, which is this entire list from over here. For an individual value, of course, like if I'm interested, for example, in Schweitzer Engineering under dest OUI, I can click on that, and then I can and not or not those into my filters. I can generate a new sessions tab with that search expression pre-populated, or I could actually flip over to Kibana if I want, and that filter would be pre-populated as well into a Discover view. So if I click Kibana dest OUI Schweitzer Engineering, you'll see it flip over to a new tab, and we're in Kibana, and that filter is already applied there. Okay, for the next exercise, we're going to identify the top network services or protocols in spy view where either side of the connection is a publicly routable IP address. So we're going to hop over to spy view again, and it'll load that data up, and it'll probably just be the stuff from what we had before in the last exercise. So let me hide that stuff because I don't really care to see it for this one. Don't want it cluttering up my view. Okay, so let's, the ones we're going to view for here, I'm going to close the Zeek one for a minute. I want to view, of course, some IP addresses, so I'm going to type IP, and I should see dest IP and source IP, and I'm going to get the top values for those ones, and then we want that protocol. So what we had talked about in the question, and so I'm going to click protocols. IP protocol is like TCP, UDP, ICMP, GRE, that sort of thing. Protocols is the application level protocol. So I can see my protocols there, and We can look at these IP addresses though, and we can see that there's a lot of them in here that aren't publicly routable IP addresses. Now that may still fit into our definition because we're looking for one where either side is. So there's a couple of different ways we can do this. In fact, let's open up this same stuff in Zeek. Remember how I talked about the let's see, we're gonna originating host. Remember the Zeek terminology is originating host and responding host. So originating host, responding host, and then the Zeek terminology that we're going to use is service. Okay, right? So remember how I talked about before, we may be looking at all of the data here in general with Zeek and Arkime sessions, and then here under Zeek logs, of course, it's just the Zeek ones. We talked in the other video about tags, right? And I talked about how there's this tag where we could do something like tags is external source, external destination, and that's the kind of thing we would do in Kibana to get the answer for this, where tags is either external source or external destination. However, the external source and external destination tags that I talked about during the other video when we were talking specifically at that point about Kibana and the tags that happen to the Zeek logs during log enrichment, those same tags don't get applied to the Arkime sessions. I don't have that. I'm not currently hooking into Arkime at any point to be able to do that. And so the what we need to do if we want to make sure that we're not just seeing Zeek logs in this case that have these one or the other of these tags applied, the other way you can do this one is I do have, let me refresh my search here without any tags. I do have a view that's pre-built in Malcolm's version of Arkime, and that view is called public IP addresses. And actually, you can see when I mouse over it, it's a ugly thing. And basically, it's saying where either the source IP or the dest IP is not in one of the known private IP ranges for IPv4 or IPv6, then that's what we want to see. So if I click that public IP addresses view, you'll see that view is applied here, and then the external IP addresses for both the Arkime sessions and the Zeek logs will be shown. So just be aware of that the tags, some of the tags, the ones that you apply during upload, or the ones that are extracted from the file names, those ones are applied to both Zeek logs and Arkime sessions. But some of those other ones that happen during enrichment, such as cross-segment, internal IP, or internal source, internal destination, external source, external destination, those ones only apply to Zeek logs and not to Arkime sessions. And that's just something that you should be aware of. So anyway, there we go. These are the top network services where either side of the connection is a publicly routable IP address. We have HTTP, TLS, SSH, ICMP, Samba, etc. So those are all ones that we could go track down if we were concerned, particularly maybe that there's X forwarding going on or remote desktop or something like that, where one side or the other of the connection is external to our network. Okay, we are now going to use SpyGraph to view the top HTTP user agent strings chronologically and geographically and see if any of those are concerning to us. So we're going to do that by going over to SpyGraph, and by default I think protocols is what we have selected here. So we are going to change that to look for user agent string. I'll start to type agent, and it looks like we have a couple different choices here, right? Now you can see here it's broken out a few ways, where we have http.useragent. That's going to be the Arkime name of that field, and that'll include both Arkime sessions and Zeek logs. If we wanted to restrict it to just Zeek, we could look at Zeek HTTP user agent, or of course we could apply view for PCAP files for Arkime sessions or just Zeek logs. But in this case, we'll look at everything. So yeah, we're going to choose http.useragent. And we have the spy graph now broken out. Here's all of our sessions. Or, if we're interested in packets, bytes, data bytes, that's, excludes some headers. But sessions is probably good enough for now. Okay, and I'm going to be interested in maybe seeing more than just the top 20. Who knows how many I have? Might take a second longer, but I'm going to choose 500. In this case, it's not really going to take longer because we already have, we pretty much already have them. And we can also change the sorting on that. We can either do it, of course, alphabetically or by count. So I guess let's just do it by count. So yeah, here we are. We're looking at anything with a HTTP user agent. And we're going to scroll down through this list here. You note that as you click on these, you can see the same values, the same options for these values that we have when we were in SpyView or in sessions for that matter. But we'll scroll down and look. And now, what is of interest, right? The question is, are there any items of concern, I guess? And I guess that really depends on your network, right? You might be in a network where you're not doing any HTTP, of any note, and so maybe anything would be of interest to you. Or maybe you're in a Windows only shop where you don't have any Linux, and so seeing something like this might be of interest to you. Or maybe just regular web browsing in a heterogeneous network is not unusual, and so you've got all sorts of different stuff. So it really just depends. Things that might be of interest are anything that's very regular. So this, for example, I think is interesting because this shows a good pattern of regularity, right? Like let's see what we're looking at here. Like once per minute, you're getting exactly 4 sessions. And if we zoom in a little bit more, we've got 2 sessions every, if I could click, 2 sessions or so every minute, or every 30 seconds, I guess. So to me, right, that looks very much like this is obviously automated, right? There's probably not someone sitting there with a stopwatch, making sure they click on a link to initiate a new HTTP session exactly every minute. And so this is something that could be interesting to you if you're interested in something that's being automated in your system, and it's just using a kind of a generic user agent string. This might be of interest to me if I am interested in someone who's using Nmap to analyze what's in my network. Maybe that's something that you're doing regularly as part of your kind of continuous security assessments. But that's certainly something that might be of interest to you. There's some Windows Media Player stuff. You notice I skipped one. We're going to come back to that one. And there's WebDAV and various different things. To me, I think this Python URL lib 2.71 is probably of interest and possibly the one of most concern for this particular example, because often Python URL lib will be kind of a standard library that someone writing a Python script to execute network code or to connect to HTTP servers in your network would use, right? And so if I were particularly interested in this Python URL lib user agent and I wanted to learn more about that from the spy graph, I could certainly click on here and say, hey, give me a new sessions tab with that filtered already applied. And then let's zoom back out on our day's time to get to the beginning and the end of the day. Okay, so there are 34 entries where the HTTP user agent was Python URL lib 2.7. And you'll see most of these are going to be from our HTTP log from Python or from Zeek. The ones with no value here under the Zeek log type are obviously our Arkime sessions. And Arkime is nice enough to give us the URI right here in the info column. So if we wanted to get kind of an overview of what those URIs are, we could see, a pretty good list of what the IP address and URI that's being accessed with that Python script. And the cool thing is this can kind of set up a feedback loop for us, right? I was over on the spy graph looking at the user agent. I pivoted to the sessions for that particular Python URL lib 2.7 value, and then I could take that URI and turn right back around and say, hey, give me that URI in spy graph, right? So that user agent string is still applied, only now we're looking at URI, and we can see over time and geographically those URIs, right? So this Python URL lib 2.7 user agent accessed these URIs, and you'll note actually in this case we've got public IP addresses as well. This login.asp, bypass.png, etc. At these times. So SpyGraph is really powerful, a really good way to break out things that might be of interest. Oops, I'll just go back to our SpyGraph. There we go. Yeah, to break out these values of interest to you over time and geographically really lets you see, interesting things very quickly. All right, next we are going to use the connections view to view Zeek connections grouping by originating and responding network segments. So we're going to go to the connections view, and we are going to look at, now you'll see to begin with, we are given source IP and dest IP, and we're given a very small query size. So it looks like there's not really very much going on in our network. Now we know that this is actually just because the query size is small by default to prevent a long query from executing before you're able to get your filters and things applied the way you want them to be. So let's start with filtering, because that's what you always want to do first. We want to view Zeek connections grouping by originating and responding network segments. Now, since we're not interested in one particular protocol over another, we're just going to look at Zeek con.log. Let's apply that con.log view here, where Zeek.log type equals con, and that's going to reduce drastically the amount of data we've got here. And it was a little bit faster. Grouping by originating and responding network segments. Okay, so I'm going to come up here to source, and I'm going to type segment, and I've got originating network segment. So we can see now the source has become originating, and we're going to do dest as responding. Okay, now it's like, what is going on here, right? There's nothing. And now that we've got everything figured out as far as our filters and stuff go, and just specifying our source and destination, we're going to increase that query size to max so we can really see everything. Okay, so now we've got a little bit more of something that makes a little bit more sense. What we're not seeing here is, so this is just everything for which we have IP addresses that fell in one of those name map UI mappings that we made. If you'll remember from the other video, when we were doing this, we specified our segments as site office network, battery network, combined cycle BOP, wind turbine network, substation network, and solar panel network. So when we specified these name mappings, any traffic that fell inside one of those name mappings is going to end up with a originating or a responding network segment as a value here. And so if we don't see a connection, it's because this is indicating that there was intra segment traffic within the wind turbine network, but nothing that reached out and talked to one of the other ones. And there's all sorts of stuff we can do here with this. Just from the point of view of visualizing it, you can increase the distance between these nodes. spread things out a little bit more. You can increase or decrease the text size, zoom in and out either with your scroll wheel or with these buttons. As you drag things around and stuff, they will stay locked until you click this little unlock button. And then finally, you can export this as a PNG as well, which looks kind of like that. So yeah, that's the connections view. A lot of fun time can be spent playing with these, I think. The other thing we want to do though is let's see kind of another angle of this. We're going to change the destination node to represent the application protocol. So I'm going to start typing service here. We've got zeek.service. And that completely changes kind of the nature of the graph, right? Now our originating network segment, you can kind of see from which network segments are talking to which protocols. And sometimes, depending on how many nodes there are, it's easier to see things if you do kind of drag them around a little bit. Sometimes kind of some weird stuff does happen as far as like getting like these long ones, and that's just kind of I guess a quirk of the underlying rendering library for this thing, right? But you can see pretty easily that like, hey, you know, my substation network is talking over Telnet, and it's the only one that's doing that, whereas site office network, solar panel network, wind turbine network, battery network, and combined cycle BOP are all using Samba, right? So mousing over these and looking at the connections that they represent, I feel can be useful and a good way to get kind of a feeling of what's talking to what in your network. Okay, in this next exercise, we are going to list HTTP sessions for which full PCAP payload is available. So let's start with the full PCAP payload being available. That's going to be easily found by applying this PCAP files view. In other words, it's basically just applying a search for which zeek.log type does not exist, and that includes our Arkime sessions. So that's part of it, but we're looking for particularly HTTP traffic. Now, if I didn't know what the field was already, you know what? I could pick some other field, apply a protocols equals SMB filter, and then just, you know, change that to HTTP. Or of course, you can just type protocols equals HTTP. Go look in the help if you want the full fields list. But yeah, protocols is the one that we're interested in here. And so that gives us a list. We've got 935 matching sessions. And we are now narrowing the connections which transmitted at least 8 kilobytes of data. So we've got this column here, data bytes and bytes. And data bytes includes basically is excluding like some of the headers and stuff of the packets. So we're just talking like the application payload itself versus the entire packet size. So it's kind of a matter of semantics, which we're interested in. But again, like where I don't know exactly what the names of these fields are, if I haven't looked at it a whole bunch of times, a couple different things we could do. We could just click on one of these. So let's click on data bytes, and we're just going to and in 1749. Now, of course, that's not really what we want. We don't really want 1749, but I just did that so that I could see that data bytes was the name of the field, so I don't have to remember that all the time. So I'm going to change this to greater than or equal to 8,000. Great. So now we are looking at Arkime sessions where protocols is HTTP and data bytes is greater than or equal to 8,000. That's what we wanted to narrow down to. So now that we've got that, we're going to export a PCAP file containing all of the matching sessions. So I'm going to click the little down arrow here on the right hand side of the views button, and I'm going to click export PCAP. And we've got a couple of choices here: open items, visible items, and matching items. And you can see as we mouse over helpfully what this will apply to. Right now I don't have any of these expanded. So if I were to apply open items, I would basically get an empty PCAP. Visible items, you see that I am looking at 50 sessions because we're paginated here at 50 per page by default. And so visible items is just what I've got on the page here with me. And then of course matching items is anything that matches this 121 sessions that we got from these filters here and the view. So that's what we want. We're going to click matching items. Linked segments is basically stepping one kind of degree of freedom out from these exact sessions. We could refer to the Arkime help to get a little more detail on that. I'm going to click no at the time, for now I mean, and then we can give it a file name, you know, http 8kplus.pcap. And then I click export PCAP, and it reaches out to where those PCAPs are, and it carves them out, and it generates this http 8k plus PCAP, and I can open that in Wireshark or save it or whatever. Okay, for our last specific to Arkime exercise, in the sessions view, we are going to view HTTP sessions where Windows PowerShell scripts were uploaded or downloaded. We are going to examine the packet payload of one of those sessions to view the contents of one of those scripts. So here I am in the sessions view. I have cleared my filters out from the previous exercise, so we're looking at all of our entries. If I know I'm going to be doing just Arkime session stuff again, and I want to get this set filtered down, so we're not viewing Zeek logs, as we know we're not going to be looking into the payload of Zeek logs as we don't have the payload. I'm going to apply the PCAP files filter again, get our stuff narrowed down here. So there's a few ways that we could investigate which fields are available for filtering, where we're talking about, you know, something that was downloaded over HTTP or uploaded over HTTP using the that were PowerShell scripts. A couple of different ways we could do that. If we click on the help, and I'm going to open this in a new tab so I don't lose my filters, but I'm going to click on a new tab and then click over to it. We're in the help now, and I click on fields. A couple different things I could do. I could try searching for, well, let's just see what's available that's HTTP related. So I start typing HTTP. I see a whole bunch of stuff HTTP related. Scroll down here. HTTP.URI is probably a good bet because if it's PowerShell, it might have, you know, .ps1 in the URI. What else do we maybe have? Body Magic, maybe? That could be the, you know, I'm not sure if PS1, I can't remember if it has its own MIME type, but if libfile has, if there's like magic stuff that can figure out that it's a MIME type of PS1, of a PowerShell script, we could look at that. So let's try one of those two. Let's jump back to sessions. Let's try the MIME type one first, just for fun. Okay, so what do we have? We have libfile content type. In this one, of course, it's an exe file. What if we were to export unique libfile content type with counts, or just libfile content type? See if PS1 is one of those. Okay, HTML, plain, octet stream, DOS exec, XML, MS-DOS, batch, and Perl. This one might be. I should have got the counts with that. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think .bat files are going to be the same as .ps1 files from the point of view of libfile. So I don't see one specific for PS1 for PowerShell files here. It's probably just going to be included in plain text. So I don't think the URIs or the libfile content type is going to do it for us to get this one. So let's do something else. Let's look for URI. We remembered that was called http.uri. And we're going to do equals equals, and then we'll do a wildcard like star.ps1 maybe. That should show us, okay, so that'll give us a few, 14 entries, and we can look at the URI over here in the info column and see PS1 is in fact, you know, now, is there a possibility that there are other ways to transfer PS1 files, or any file for that matter, right? Absolutely there are. They could be, you know, with a different, if they were even just with a different file extension, we would be missing them here. But that's okay for this example. Let's pick one that we might be interested in. I don't know. Let's pick this last one. Post-exploitation invoke brute force. Probably real bad. So we are going to expand out that session. We see our general stuff here, and we see our HTTP specific stuff here, and then we see our packet payload area. Now, you'll see mine just from previous sessions has remembered how I like to have this formatted, which for me, I generally like to look at natural, and then I usually click uncompress and show images and files. There are other ways to look at this, but that is usually pleasing to me. To look at, and then we can see a few different things here. One, if we mouse over the source, you can see this is just a little sliver. I'm going to mouse over destination, and that's a little better. You can see a representation of the entropy of that file in this nice little kind of image, which is cool when you mouse over it. You also get that when you mouse over this file link. Now, when I have show images and files turned on, I see this little download link for invoke bruteforce.ps1. If I turn show images and files off, you'll see I actually see the plain text of the file here just inline. And that's great. And that really satisfies what we need to do for here, which is to view the contents of one of these scripts. But if I wanted to download it, see it maybe in a text editor with a little bit better formatting and stuff, I could click that show images and files, click that link. Now, one thing you want to be careful with here, this could be live malware, right? Like, I don't want to download some executable file and then accidentally run the thing and double click it. So when you do download a file, it does save it with this .pellet extension, but be careful, it is just the raw file. So in this case, I'm going to open that up with Sublime Text and not download new version right now. And then you can see the we can see all sorts of stuff here, including in this case, since this is obviously just used as part of the capture the flag, we've got some good links here that show how it's used and everything. But that's about it, right? Any certain file type that we're interested in, when we get to an Arkime session and that file was transferred there, we can see generally a link to that in the section here underneath the bottom of the payload. And now, if this session contained multiple different transfers back and forth, you might actually see multiple source and destination that kind of piggyback back and forth like a normal connection would, because that's exactly what we're viewing here. We are going to practice something now that I feel is really important, and that's being able to view all of the relevant information about a network session, drawing from both our Zeeklog data source type and the Arkime sessions data source type. So what we're going to do is we're going to identify a particular file transfer that we're interested in. We're going to review all of the Kibana dashboards and the information that the Zeeklogs can give us about that file transfer. And then we are going to pivot from Kibana to Arkime using the Zeek connection UID. And then from there, we'll kind of broaden our search and see all of the relevant records relating to this session, not just the Zeeklogs, but also the Arkime sessions. And then once we've found that Arkime session, we can examine its payload and download its PCAP. In Kibana, we are looking at the entirety of our logs from this PCAP session, and we want to identify and filter for the unique identifier of the earlier of two transfers of files with the application/x executable MIME type. And there's not anything, any particular reason that I chose this one. So, I mean, this pattern could be applied to any information that you're interested in. So, I've clicked on the Files dashboard because that's where we're going to start looking for information about a particular file transfer by MIME type. And as luck would have it, that file's MIME type bar chart is right here. I'm going to expand or inspect the details of this and look for the one we're interested in. Looks like there's just one page, and there it is, application X executable. This plus button here, filter for value, will narrow my search down to where I'm just looking at two files of that transfer type. And they all happened, it would appear, in a very short amount of time. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. We can see that these were transferred over HTTP. One of them is just over 3 megs and one of them is just under. Anyway, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and we are going to figure out which one of these is earlier. It's pretty easy to see here. One of them was at 2:01 and 18 seconds. The other one was at 2:01 and 20 seconds. So we have two bits of information here that could be very useful to us. One is the Zeek FUID, and the other is the Zeek.UID. That file unique identifier and the connection session unique identifier. So we are going to note this. In fact, I'm going to put it in my clipboard right now, but I'm also going to filter for it, and that's going to filter our filters are MIME type is application X executable, and Zeek UID is the connection that I'm interested in, unique identifier. I'm going to get rid of this other filter, and then I'm going to pin the UID filter. So that's going to make sure that this filter stays selected no matter what dashboard I go to. So I'm going to go back to the overview dashboard, and we're going to review whatever other pieces of information this might have for relevance to us. We've got the HTTP log, it looks like, the files log that we just came from, and then con.log. And each of these logs is going to have a little bit, some other useful information for us. If we were to go to the connections dashboard, it's going to be stuff about the actual TCP connection. Looks like it was an IPv4 TCP connection, and between a Schneider Electric and an Amazon Technologies Inc. device. This probably implies something was done on AWS, I would guess. I'm not sure. And we have, the bytes that were transferred and the source IP and dest IP, the connection state. So all the stuff that you would normally expect for con.log about this particular session. The other one we noticed was http.log. So let's go look at that. And http.log has one session that links to this particular, one transaction that relates to this particular Zeek connection. And it was a GET, and it got an OK. And, same kind of stuff. Looks like the only thing that might be extra of interest to us here is maybe the user agent. Oh, and then we, of course, have the URI. HTTP 10.10.10.11 post exploitation, and then slash PSPy32. So that's all good stuff. And I think really, with those three logs, that's about all we can get out of the Zeek logs for this, all we can get out of Kibana. So I do have that Zeek UID, and we are going to get to Arkime and we're going to see what else we can learn from it. And this is that pivoting based on that Zeek UID. So I want to expand my time frame to everything so I can get my area that I'm looking at here. And there we are. I'm going to zoom in on that time frame so we can be specifically looking at this, the time range that encloses this PCAP. Okay. And we know that Zeek UID, so let's start there. Now remember, there are actually two fields that I mapped this to, one for kind of a compatibility with Arkime, and then one just to keep the Zeek parlance. So we could do Zeek.UID equals that field value. Oh, don't tell me I didn't copy it. I thought I did. Okay, fine, we'll get it. Don't worry. There it is. Okay, so we could either do that, or the other one is root ID. Those two, from the point of view of a Zeek log, are interchangeable. So we've already narrowed down to those three records that we were interested in, right? I mean, you could compare the two. Here in Arkime, we have HTTP con and files.log. And in Kibana, we also have HTTP files and con.log. But we want to have more than just that. We want to have the information about the Arkime session as well, so that we can see the whole kit and caboodle all together. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this connection ID field, which is this flow hashing technique that is, community ID. Community ID is this flow hash that is used across various different tools in network traffic analysis. That community ID can be found in the con.log entry. And there it is. So we have our root ID, right? And we have this community ID. And we have all of our Zeek stuff down here. Responding host name. This is our cellular modem. in our battery network, and all of that stuff we would expect to have from the Zeek log. But this community ID, what we're going to do is OR that in to our root ID search filter. So basically, what are we saying? We're saying show me anything where either of these is true. Root ID is this connection UID, or my community ID is this ugly string. And so this left-hand side of this filter is going to get all of my Zeek log stuff, HTTP con and files. And this right-hand side of my selection, my search, is going to get me the Arkime sessions that match that, and then also my zeekcon.log. So I run that, and we got one more line that we did not have before. We have this line right here, which is the Arkime session. And we know that because it doesn't have a Zeek log type. Of course, we could, filter between the two using the view if we wanted to, using Zeek logs or PCAP files, or all, or none, I guess, no view. So what can that give us? Well, that gives us, besides all this good information that Zeek populated for us from the files.log and, things that Arkime might not necessarily know about this, that Zeek might know about it, but the things that Arkime knows about it that Zeek doesn't is the payload. So from here, right, I have the same sort of header information that I was seeing before, but I also have this new area that I didn't have from the Zeek logs, which contains the entire transaction from a PCAP level, from the payload level. So here's my source header, my request header, my response header, and then that payload, which is that PS-Py32 executable file. So the only other thing we wanted to do was to actually get the, of course we could download this file now if we wanted to, but I think what we were interested was downloading the PCAP of this session. So I'm going to click download PCAP. Now, of course, note I have to be on the, oh, come on, close. Here, I'm going to close it this way. I have to be on the Arkime session for that to do anything, right? If I'm on the con session, and I click download PCAP, I don't think it works. I know it doesn't work. I don't know if what's going to do. It's going to break something. Yeah, it's going to basically say, give you an error and say, I don't know where the PCAP for this is because there's no PCAP for these Zeek logs. So what we want to make sure is that we have that Arkime session record selected. We click that download PCAP, and it's going to say, hey, here's the session PCAP for this communication, and we can open that in Wireshark and have all the information we would want from a more low-level point of view if that was interesting to us. So practice using that pattern, because I think that's really a really powerful thing to be able to do. Start over on the Kibana side, drill down to something we're interested in, flip over to the Arkime side, and then use that connection UID and that community ID string to just show everything that might be related to that session. Finally, as kind of a little bonus exercise, let's talk about some OT network assessment tips. And some of these will apply, of course, to IT networks as well, and then some of them will be more specific to OT. So anyway, first, identify cross-segment traffic. Second, identify internal to external and external to internal traffic. Evaluate ICS protocols and correlate ICS traffic with suspect zones or hosts. Evaluate protocols of concern and their usage patterns, and that might include everything from file transfers to types of traffic that are used to remote and control a remote network remotely, or protocols generally not found in OT networks. And then finally, identify insecure, vulnerable, or deprecated protocols or protocols versions. Since Malcolm already has, especially on the Kibana side, a lot of dashboards built particularly specifically to answer these questions, this will be kind of a short one, but I think it's worth mentioning. So let's go ahead. Okay, so let's begin. We are going to start out by identifying cross-segment traffic. And in most of these, there's more than one way to do this, and so I'll show you a few ways in each. Some of our previous exercises actually have already covered this one, so we can be quick about this one. Probably the easiest way to do it, if you've defined your host names, and more specifically your subnet names with the host and network segment mapping name mapping tool that I showed you is to just use the tag. We've got a tag called cross segment, and that'll tell us everything we need to know. Anything where we have a source of one network segment and a destination of another network segment, both of those values have to be set and then be different. You'll see that here. Note that that won't show us things for which we have no segment set. And so in order to do that, we would need to expand our filter out and maybe include external or internal traffic with that. But to see, within your defined network segments where there's crosstalk, this cross segment tag is the easiest way to do it. And then, of course, if you want more details about that, the Discover view is probably an easy way to do that. Looking at our Discover view, applying the tags cross segment filter, and then, looking at the fields that we're interested in. Originating segment, responding segment, I don't know, service probably would be one we'd be interested in. And then IP address, ridge_h, and response_h. Right, so this will show us where there's, now on some of these you'll notice there's not a particular protocol. Either the protocol was unknown or whatever. So we could, we could say only show us stuff where the service exists, in which case I don't have anything here. It looks like all of that was just general TCP traffic. We could also include, or UDP, I guess, zeek.proto would tell us. Right, so this is just kind of generic TCP traffic. But you get the idea, right? It's a good way for us to see cross-segment traffic, in this case, on a connection-by-connection level. Of course, you could build your own custom visualization to show this. You could include other tags like external source, external destination, that sort of thing, to include traffic from the outside world. But in this case, it does give us a pretty good starting place to see where our crosstalk is across our different defined network zones. From the Arkime point of view, let's see how we could get kind of the same information. Of course, we could just do the search here and see the same logs. I won't do that because I think it's kind of repetitive and we've already seen that. I think the connections view would be a fun one. Being able to, and we've done this already in one of our examples, but we can do it again real quick. We'll choose our Zeek con.log because everything at least will be represented in connections, and then we can drill to other logs at that point. And again, if we were to apply that tags equals, I don't know, it's lagging a little right now. Cross segment. Not sure why my browser has decided now is a good time to have a kind of a little crisis, but it's going a little slow. It's not you, it's me. Okay, and again, to begin with, we do have cross segment. This shows us cross segment by IP address by default, right? So that's in and of itself pretty useful. Of course, we could change these to be, you could see what the segments are, I guess. Originating network segment, responding network segment, and then of course increase our query size. So both good ways to see cross-segment traffic. Note that these links between the two are in and of themselves interactive, right? So if I click on a link, I can then, my filters in with these values, and these values into my filters, I guess is a better way to say it. And then run that again, of course, and it's going to get a little bit less interesting as far as the graph goes. And then I can take that over here and have that same filter applied in my sessions. So that's a pretty good way, I think, to see cross-segment traffic, and to be able to identify maybe where we need to go examine and check to see if those boundaries really should or should not be crossed. The next one, identify internal to external and external to internal traffic. I guess let's start with Kibana again, just for consistency's sake. So I'm going to go back to my Kibana dashboard. I've got all my events here. So this PCAP is actually a little weird, and let me preface what I'm about to show you with that. There are external public IP addresses in this PCAP, but they're actually all there aren't any crossover, I guess, into the internal network or out from the internal network. And so I guess what that means is the network traffic capture was taken at a point where it was either kind of on the other side of whatever firewall was used to generate this, but there isn't anything that shows a private subnet on one side and a public subnet on the other side. But we can determine the external traffic anyway, and then show you where that would be if there was external to internal or internal to external traffic. And the place I would go to start that would be the security overview. Security overview will show you inbound external traffic by country and outbound internal traffic by country. In other words, where one side, the internal side is private and the external side is public, and then vice versa in this graph. And like I said, in this case, the graph is empty. You can see on the map here that there is some traffic that has external endpoints, but not any that seems to be reaching in. Now, we do have another graph down here that's useful, external remote access over time. And essentially what this graph is it is tracking any protocols that Malcolm deems to be kind of remote access protocols, SSH, VNC, our desktop, Telnet, that sort of thing, where one side or the other has network, has an external IP address. So in this case, we do have one session over SSH where the traffic either originated from or ended in an external IP address, a publicly routable IP address. Same thing again with the Arkime side. We get our time filter. A couple different ways we can do this. One, to determine if we're looking just at the Zeek logs, we could use that same tags value. That's not going to give us the Arkime sessions, but it'll get us a good start. So we could do tags cross segment. Oh, sorry, we're not doing cross segment anymore. So we're doing basically if tags is external source or tags is external destination. That's going to show us all of our traffic. That's going to show all of our traffic that has either end of that connection in a publicly routable IP address. The other thing you can do from Arkime is I have a pre-built view for you that does exactly this, which is the public IP addresses view. You can click that, and you get kind of the same results, only it would also include the Arkime sessions, anything that's got a public IP address. So hopefully that's pretty kind of self-evident one. Let's move on to the next one, which is evaluate ICS protocols and correlate ICS traffic with suspect zones or hosts. Okay, so to start with an ICS protocol type of question, I would start with the ICS/IoT security overview dashboard. And I'm going to see in my traffic that I have got these protocols: Modbus, COTP, S7COM, Ethernet IP, and CIP. What can we determine from this? Well, we want to correlate this with zones or hosts. And so I guess what I would probably do is take these values and then let's few things. To look at hosts, I guess we can start to look at our ICS IoT source IP and ICS IoT destination IP dashboards. Visualizations. These visualizations will limit the protocols to ICS protocols and then give you a good listing of the hosts in those that are using those protocols. So you could use that to correlate ICS traffic with specific zones or hosts. If you wanted to get a little bit more general and just look at the subnets themselves, probably the thing to do would be switch over to Arkime again, and then this is a little inconvenient, but I guess this is one way we could do it. We could do protocols equals, I think this is the syntax for it. If not, I'll feel kind of dumb. Modbus, I guess let's just see if that's the right syntax. Yeah, it is. So we're going to do basically Modbus, ENIP, CIP, S7COM, COTP. We could get our whole, in fact, that would be I should make a note to self. We're going to make a view here for ICS protocols. That would be probably pretty useful. So now we're looking at these protocols that we know we have in our network here that are ICS protocols. And then if we're interested in where those protocols are being used, a couple different things we could do. We could hop over to Spy View, and we could look at network segment in our Spy View, originating network segment, responding network segment. We could even look at host name, originating host name, responding host name for the ones where we have host names mapped, which isn't a lot of them apparently. So this would show you where these segments in particular are, which segments are using these protocols. And then just because I'm a fan, of course, the connections view would be another great way to do it. Let's in our connections view specify the service as the destination, and then originating network segment as the source. And where we're filtering by these ICS protocols, let's increase our query size. And then we should get everything as soon as it's done hooting. There we go. So not a lot of overlap actually between which network, we aren't reusing network protocols across different subnets. But our solar panel network is using S7COM. Our combined cycle BOP network is doing everything over Ethernet IP. And then our battery network is what's using Modbus. So yeah, we've correlated ICS traffic with our network zones. Let's evaluate protocols of concern and their usage patterns. So we're going to do that. We'll start out by going back over to Kibana. We'll just reset to the overview. We could look at application protocols here in this list and identify any that we might be interested in here. So I guess let's go one through one though. Protocols of concern and their usage patterns. The first one that we have kind of as a sub-bullet on that slide that I started this out with was file types and transfer methods. We already know how to do that. If you were paying attention earlier, it's the files dashboards. We do have a list of all the file types that were transferred here. We can inspect that data and pick ones that we're interested in. And then, of course, the transfer methods are listed right here as well. In HTTP, SMB, and RDP are our transfer methods for these files. Remote sessions, RDP, VNC, SSH, Telnet, etc. Again, we have dashboards for most of those, so if there's one that you're particularly interested in, for example, RDP, if we want to know about remote desktop sessions, we just go to the RDP dashboard and we can see everything we need to know about that. Same for Telnet, only one Telnet session here, SSH, whatever protocols might be of interest to you. And then, of course, that security overview dashboard that lists external remote accesses using those protocols can be found here on the security overview dashboard. And then protocols generally not found in OT networks, NTP, DHCP, IPv6, etc. A lot of the times in an OT network you won't see some of these protocols being used, and so their presence could be an indication that there's either a misconfiguration of network segmenting or some rogue server or something that you're not aware of. So go to the ICS IoT Security Overview dashboard, And ideally we would be filtering by the network segments that are interesting to us. In this case, we know we have a segment. Let's see. Segment. The originating segment is not, what do we call it? Side office. That's our IT network, right? So we're going to put a filter in where it's not the side office on either the responding segment or the oops, what do we do? Site office. There we go. Okay, that's filtered us down to where we're looking at not the side office network. And then we could look at our non-ICS/IoT protocols observed. So, some of these may be normal in an ICS network or in your ICS network, but this is a list of our non-ICS protocols found outside of our corporate network. And we may want to review those and say, I might be interested in pinning this filter and then hopping over to Telnet or whatever and seeing why Telnet's being used in my, what network is it? I don't know. Let's find out. In our substation network. What's that all about, right? So identify what protocols you think should be existing in your different network subnets, your different network segments, and then follow those threads one by one. Identify insecure, vulnerable, or deprecated protocols or protocol versions. This one is pretty easy because it's in the security overview dashboard already. The outdated/insecure applications protocols table will show you that. And you might wonder what criteria I'm using to indicate something as being insecure, vulnerable, or deprecated. And this may not be a perfect list. And if you think it needs to be updated, throw an issue out on GitHub and say, hey, we should include protocol XYZ in this list, or this particular version of this protocol, and we'll evaluate those suggestions and incorporate them if they make sense. But if we wanted to know what was going on here with this table, we could go to Edit Visualization, and you'll see my query string here, right? Where it's SSH less than version 2, or Samba less than version 2, or TLS less than version 1.2, NTP less than version 4, etc. Right? It's this big long string. So this visualization right here can give you a pretty good idea of protocols that you may consider as insecure or outdated, and ones that may be ready for evaluation or removal from your network, or at least to track them down and note them and say, yeah, in our policy, I've made an exception because we have to use this old version of this software or whatever. But something you should be aware of and something you should document. We'll cancel that editing and cancel that. So yeah, I hope that gives us a good idea of some things we might want to tackle when we first come to network. A new network that we want to assess the security of, or when we want to do ongoing assessments of our networks, particularly networks protecting industrial control systems or critical infrastructure for your organization. Thanks for spending a couple of hours with me today, getting our hands dirty, as it were, doing network traffic analysis with Malcolm. Every network is different, as is every analyst's approach. But it's my strong belief that learning to use the tools Malcolm provides will enhance your visibility into, and by extension, your understanding of, the networks you're interested in securing. If you have comments, questions, suggestions, or issues, please reach out via the GitHub issue tracker or on Gitter. We'd love to hear from you, even if it's just to share with us how you're using Malcolm. Thanks, and have a great day.